Welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show features up-and-coming indie authors who sit down with us and talk about their recently released books. Join us as we chat with our next guest author. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Author Roundup. My name is Emma, and I will be your host for today's special episode. I hope you are well. With me right now is our self-published author for today, and his name is Norman Coggins. Norman would describe himself as a man with a very capable imagination. He feels he is more a writer than an author, writing to share his thoughts, questions, and considerations of life within the framework of a story. He'd like for people to gain the same benefit reading as he experiences in writing books. He is here today to discuss his latest published book, Walking on Water: Footsteps of a Fisherman. Hi, Norm. How are you today? Thanks for joining me today.
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you, Emma.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad you're here with me. I'm excited to learn more about your publication. Can you tell us more about your book, Walking on Water?
Well, it's the second book I've done. The first one was Caretaker of a King. This one, Walking on Water, is following Peter's life from the time that Jesus asked him to use his boat to preach to the crowd, and then the miraculous catch of fish happens just after that. And from that time on to Peter's death, where he stands before Nero and defies Nero and ends up being crucified. But it's his walk with Jesus where he goes from emptiness, having just lost his wife, to having fulfilled God's purpose, and the ups and downs in between.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, your book explores the story of Peter, a deeply flawed yet profoundly influential disciple of Jesus. What inspired you to delve into Peter's life, and why do you believe his story resonates with readers today?
Well, I think we all fall. So I think that connects us with Peter.
Mhm.
In his case, my personality is quite different than his. I think most people have all varied personalities. So Peter's personality may be unique, but the fact that he had his ups and downs in life, his falls and his troubles, are kind of something we can all relate to. So
Right.
that's what made it kind of fun to write about him, because in that respect, I can connect to him quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, so you mentioned Peter's imperfections and his journey of faith. How do you think Peter's experiences mirror the struggles and triumphs for everyday Christians?
Well, I think most of us as Christians, we have our ups and downs, but certainly we want to follow Christ. But
Yeah.
there's those times where our humanity just it
Right.
undermines that effort. Yeah, we get distracted. There's all those sorts of influences in life that pull us different directions, and our eyes come off of Jesus. And actually, that is, the probably the episode that I found most interesting in Peter's life was when he had the faith, the boldness to get out of the boat and walk on the water.
Mhm.
But then he soon had his failing of faith too and started to sink, and Jesus rescued him. But nobody else even got out of the boat. So
Mhm.
Peter had this capacity to want to do God's will, and then his own will interfering with that. And
Mhm.
I think that's something we all relate to.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. How is your book special? How is it laid out? Is it a devotional, or how can someone experience your book?
It's a novel. It fills in between what the scripture says. I try very carefully to stay true to scripture. I don't want anything to conflict with it, but I'm trying to fill in between. But in the midst of that, some of the thoughts that go on in Peter's head, and just the things I'm learning actually as I'm writing, the things that are occurring to me, because it's kind of, for me, in studying for it and writing for it, it's kind of a devotional experience for me. So I want to share that with the reader, and I hope that's what comes across to them.
Right. So the title Walking on Water invokes an iconic scene with Peter, like you mentioned, stepping out of the boat to walking forward. How does this symbolic moment encapsulate the message, overarching message of the theme of your book?
Well, I think when Peter was at his best, when his eyes were on Christ and his faith was locked on to Jesus, and that's what carried him on the water. The
Mhm,
waters lifted him up just like they did Jesus because
mhm,
his eyes was on the Creator.
mhm.
So I think that kind of gives you the strength of Peter when he had that focus, and what can be strength for us too when we have that same focus. But also in that same scene, he loses his focus on Christ and he starts to sink. And
Mhm.
that's just so typical of all our lives. So that kind of is the overarching theme of the book. He
Right.
has his ups and downs as he has that faith, and as he fails in that faith, it goes all through his life. But he continually gains strength, I think, as he aged and was walking longer and closer to God. I think
Mhm.
that he became a more consistent man. And I think we see that in the biblical account and then in the fiction that I'm adding to it.
Yeah, for sure. And also that just reminds me, I feel like what might have, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe what have has inspired you to explore the commonalities and shared experiences that we all have amongst individuals in the book. What are those shared experiences that you've had and that you think people will have while reading it?
Well, I think all of us have those episodes in life where we fall. We have good intentions. We maybe start out strong. Sometimes those good intentions are mixed with bad ones, or we acquire bad ones on the way. Uh,
Hmm.
and we take a pitfall and we need Christ to lift us up. And that's something that happened multiple times in Peter's life, and something I think that we all need,
Right.
and something that Jesus stands ready to do. There's several episodes in the book where Jesus is telling Peter to give him his hand,
Mhm.
to let him lift him up. And that theme comes up probably 4 or 5 times in the book. So I think it's again something that we all need and something we all relate to.
So you mentioned that you have written a book before. So you are a longtime writer. What inspired you to write this story, and what decided you to publish your story, to self-publish?
Well, the first one I wrote was Caretaker of a King. It's the story of Joseph
Uh-huh.
and Joseph the carpenter, and his experience in life. There's very little in the Bible about him, but it says he's a righteous man. And that's dealing with how Joseph must have felt raising Jesus in his home,
Mhm.
and the sense of inadequacy he must have had in what he was called to do. No one else was ever called to do that. But this book, when I wrote that first book, it touched on different things that being with Jesus would have, the experiences Joseph would have had being with Jesus.
Mhm.
This book, because it's about Peter walking with Jesus for most of his earthly ministry, it touches on a lot of the things that Jesus did as he interacted with people, the miracles, the teaching, the encouragement. And that was really fun for me to focus on, and kind of, it's almost like you can live it yourself when you're writing about it. And I hope that's what comes across to the reader, that they get to enjoy what I enjoyed when I was writing it.
Okay. Very nice. And when did you write your first book versus this book, Walking on Water?
Well, this one took 7 years. So, because I have a day job.
Yeah.
So, and it was longer, and I was in no hurry. The other one took probably 5 years. So, that one, I don't know exactly, because when I was writing it, I didn't know that I was going to publish it, or wasn't really thinking in terms of that. I was just enjoying the process. So
Mhm.
for me, the writing is a lot of fun. The publishing side of it is necessary if I'm going to share it, and that's what I want to do.
Right.
But the writing is what I really enjoy, and that's meaningful just on its own, and but there's another sense in which I want to share it, so I want to
Oh.
publish that, and hope that other people experience the same thing I am when I'm writing it.
And how long have you been writing for?
Oh, I've always written stuff.
Yeah.
My dad was a carpenter, which was probably what made it
Wow.
interesting. Joseph was always an interesting character to me. And for
That's
years, my brother and I built homes too. So now we have a cabinet business, but I've written
so nice.
all through my life, but more seriously and more focused and on a consistent project in recent years. So those two came out of, that fascination with Joseph kind of led to the first book, and then enjoying that process probably led to this second one. But Peter's always been a character that has been a great interest to me, and I think to most people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So where did you start writing this past book?
This past book, well, it was actually being in business together with my brother for years. We'd always try to take a cruise or a vacation or something together. So I had finished Caretaker of a King, and I, had it out there, was getting a lot of good reviews. And I have always imagined this character or this situation with Peter, and it kind of grew out of that first scene of him walking on the water, and I thought, what was his life like? I knew that it talked about his mother-in-law in the Bible and Jesus healing her, but it never mentions his wife. So, and he followed Jesus, never mentioned his wife being with him. So
Mhm.
in the book, I imagined him being alone, a widower, his wife having passed. And so it just kind of grew. I started probably trying to put myself in that situation and seeing him, how
Wow.
he might have felt, starting with and working both ways out from that scene where he was walking on the water with Jesus and had to be rescued. So it probably started on that cruise, just imagining that scene.
Wow, yeah, that's kind of perfect.
Yeah, you have a little time on your hands, can enjoy imagining a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so what was it like, finally completing your books? I know you said the first one took 5, second one took 7. So, did you know when they were, like, completed, or did you have to go back and kind of like, "Oh, I don't know if it's ready," or what was it like when they were finally completed in your eyes?
Well, there is that you write the story and then you kind of try to go back and read it as a
Yeah.
reader and trying to pretend you don't know what you were trying to say to
Mhm.
make sure it comes across. And that's a difficult editing process, I guess. And I have some friends. I have another friend that's a writer that proofread this one for me. Yeah, you kind of go back and look at that, but it is a long process. But I guess every time you read it, you think there's something that maybe you could improve or say a little different.
Mhm.
But also, after a while, when I read it, it's almost like someone else wrote it, and
Uh-huh.
I can just appreciate it and hope that others do too. But
Mhm.
I enjoy rereading them because I forget things pretty quickly. So,
So do I.
when I go back on something I wrote maybe 5 years ago, it's familiar, but also it's interesting to me because I've already forgotten parts of it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of fun to read it that way. And I really have loved. I share a lot of that with my wife as I'm working on it. Vicky will she has to put up with I'm preoccupied with some thought or I'm taking some time to write something down, and then I'll read it to her. But when she reads it all after it's complete, all published and done, with the first book, she told me, she said, "This is what you were put on this earth for," and
Yeah.
uh, that was that was really touching for me.
Oh, wow. What a supportive partner. She sounds
Mhm.
amazing. I like what you mentioned, how you can go back to your readings and find things that you forgot, but also, I feel like your books and spiritual books and religious books in general, you can always go back and take things what you need in that moment of life, right? So it's not necessarily that you forget things, but you can always go back and read something that you really need in a certain moment of your life. So I like books like that, and I like your books as well. Um, they're very inspiring, and people can take what they need from it in a sense. Can you share some insights into your writing process for Walking on Water and your first book, and maybe what your writing process was like for your first book versus your second, or if it was the same, or did you learn anything from your first book, or
I think the process was pretty much the same.
okay.
A lot of times, you mentioned you're coming for a visit here to Colorado. A lot of times, my wife and I love to just take a drive in the mountains, and often I'll have thoughts that are kind of churning in my head at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I like to write when I'm just alone. I have a chair in the corner by the fireplace downstairs, and sometimes I'll lose track of time when I'm writing something. There's been a couple of occasions. The first book has a chapter about the woman who is caught in adultery that's brought before Jesus. In the book, her name's Joanna. And I wrote that up in the mountains, pulled off with the Jeep, side of the road up there where no one was around, looking over some hilltops, and wrote a lot of that. And it was one of those fun times writing when things just kind of flow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, the process for both books was very similar. Uh,
Okay.
uh, I tend to try and just write it and then go back. And when I reread it and write it, a lot of times other thoughts occur to me that I insert. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts, things that I learned just in writing it or picturing the situation. The objective is really these lives were as real as our own. So
Mm-hmm.
the objective is to um, take them out of the realm where they might be passed over casually, like they were a myth or something, because people have
Yeah.
heard them too often and only those little bits. But
Yeah.
to fill in so that we recognize that they were real lives and at a pivotal time in history.
Yeah, and definitely having a nice, fresh perspective while obviously having the same scenes and everything and the character of the individual. It's nice, I'm sure, having and contributing to a new perspective that readers can appreciate. How did you approach researching and crafting Peter's story to resonate with a modern audience while staying true to biblical truths?
Well, I wanted to give it some sense of chronology, which the
Hmm.
Bible doesn't always have. Some of the Gospels jump around. So I wanted to put it together in a way that it could have unfolded. Now, granted, it could have happened this way. I don't know that for sure, but I wanted to kind of connect the dots on the story because we get these snapshots, and our minds are so geared, unlike the minds of the writers of the gospel, the way they wrote things. They didn't do it chronologically. So
Right.
I wanted to, because our minds work that way, I wanted to kind of connect those dots and help that then become real to me and hopefully to the reader. So there is some research in looking at, how these things could have happened. For instance, like the Peter's three denials. He
Mhm.
had a bunch of comments as he's being accused and talked about, at that episode around the fire in the courtyard as Jesus is being tried. But there were three denials. Well, how can that all come together? Sometimes it's one of the servant girls that is accusing him or commenting. Sometimes it's one of the men around there. It, it takes it. You have to piece it together in a way that it could have happened.
Mhm.
A lot of people like to think that there's some contradiction there. Well, we don't just assume contradictions when someone writes us a letter, but people want to
Mhm.
do that somehow to hopefully discredit the Bible or something. But in reality, it can all fit together. It's just that we don't have all that information.
Right.
So in writing it, I kind of piece that together too, and that's a process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Did you like the researching side of it as much as writing, or what was it like for both?
I like the writing better. but
Yeah.
the researching and understanding it, unfortunately, like I said, I don't have the greatest memory. So a lot of those things that I research is like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. But
Yeah.
then I kind of, forget about that and have to go back and research it again to remember how that could work and how that did work
Mhm.
back in that day. What the situation was, what things were like with the Roman army being around and the Roman occupation back then. You kind of got to learn a little bit about the Romans and how they did things and what the relationship was like. There's an interesting dynamic between Peter and Matthew because Matthew was a tax collector and Peter probably didn't like paying taxes any more than I do. So they had some friction at first, and it was Jesus that brought them together with his them understanding that he forgave them both. So
Mhm.
uh, those are kind of interesting things, and there is a little research involved. Yeah.
Are you a computer or journal guy? So your writings, publications involve research. So how do you keep all of your information and all of your writing together?
Well, I'll research things certainly on the computer, and some books that I have not a huge collection of books myself, but several that I could go to for information. And certainly I rely most heavily on the Bible and just what it says.
Mhm.
But yeah, I like to write handwritten everything.
Mhm.
I'll start that way and then I'll type it in into the computer, and then I'll add things as I'll do the editing and stuff on the computer. But I'm kind of old school that I just
Yeah.
like actually writing things down and
Yeah. Nothing
enjoy
wrong with
that. So that's as far as keeping research and stuff. I don't keep a lot of it. I
that. Mhm.
research it as I go. I'm I enjoy, I think that some of the things I want to get across that I'm learning come across well in a novel,
Mhm.
in something someone can enjoy rather than in like some sort of reference book. And that's not
Yeah.
me to do that sort of stuff.
So that's why you went with the fiction route, so it you can have a bunch of things together in one book. What was the writing process like for you as far as, your faith? And did writing, draw you closer to God and your faith, would you say? Has writing
Absolutely.
always yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It draws me closer. I think, and that's one of the things that I hope comes through. In one of the questions, to prepare for this was what would you share with someone else that's writing? And
Mhm,
I think that our best chance to move someone else's heart and mind is when we share something that moves ours. And
mhm,
so as I'm writing a lot of these and some of these scenes, I mean, I have tears in my eyes as I'm writing some of them. Some of them are moving to me, imagining them and then putting them into words.
mhm,
And even rereading them, it's kind of emotional for me, and I hope that comes across to the reader. I hope that
mhm,
that they get to share the experience I had writing. That's
mhm.
the major goal for me, and definitely I had times of worship, praise, gratitude, just appreciation that Christ came and went through all that he did to connect with us, to free us from our sin, that it definitely grew me spiritually.
That's so great. Is there a part of, your book that stands out the most to you?
Um, with the first book, Caretaker of a King, it's definitely Joseph's death with Jesus there,
Mhm,
and the understanding that he had of Jesus's purpose, his mission, and who he was.
mhm,
That Joseph had raised him like his own son, but knew the whole time that he was the son of God. And then there's a character there, Demetrius, who is the thief on the cross that actually Joseph had met when they're fleeing to Egypt. And So those two scenes were very significant to me. In Walking on Water, I really like the end scenes where Peter he's relating and getting to know, becoming friends with the soldiers who were sent to bring him to Nero. And he's the mentor to them and bringing them to faith in Christ. And
Mm.
I really enjoyed that part of it. There's some of the miracles that Jesus did that Peter's witnessing, the healing of a leper, where Jesus reaches out to touch him when no one was supposed to touch a leper, but when
Mm-hmm.
when Jesus reached out, he wasn't a leper any longer. That was a powerful scene to me. So yeah, there's certain ones that stand out for
Yeah.
sure.
Without
Yeah,
giving too much away.
yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're a longtime writer. You're married. So what got you into writing? What inspires you?
um, I've always written. My wife and I, Vicky and I, we've been married for 44 years now, be 45 this
Oh,
year.
wow.
Um,
Congratulations.
we have two sons,
Okay.
Nick and Joel, and I was a home builder like my father for years. We moved from Michigan to Colorado, um, built houses for a long time, my brother and I. Then we started a cabinet business. We used to build cabinets. Now we sell them. And to the stage in my life where I'm slowing down on that side, and my two sons are taking over managing the business.
Oh,
My
nice.
brother still works for the business as well. He works on commission because he's trying to slow down too. So we have other interests in life, like I do with my writing, and my wife has she loves staging and decorating, but we're looking for more time for travel and stuff. We love to go get lost in the mountains, take a Jeep up there and just wander, just seeing creation, and
Mhm.
traveling a little bit, seeing the world. But um, yeah, that's kind of been our journey. And
Beautiful.
writing has been something I've always loved to do. Uh,
Mhm.
so I wrote a Civil War novel that we never published, my brother and I. Uh,
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Maybe at some point we'll publish that too. Who knows? But these stories are closer to my heart, and
Mhm.
and one of the things I like about these is want my granddaughter, and I have another grandchild on the way. Um,
Oh, exciting.
I want them to have that because honestly, it asked about goals. I don't care if my name's known, but I do want my heart to be known, especially to my kids and grandkids
Mhm.
and my friends and a lot of people that have read the book that I've never known have sent me a letter or talked to me, at
Mhm.
church and told me what it meant to them, and I love that.
That's awesome. Letters, that's so exciting. That's so special. Yeah, I was going to ask, my next question was, what's the nicest feedback or review you've received about your book or your first book?
I mentioned my wife,
Yeah.
just starting to get some reviews on Walking on Water because, people will, it's hard enough for people to take time to read. People are busy, and I'm honored if they read either one or both. Um, but it's hard for people to find the time. Life is busy and they don't, it's hard to take that much time to read something. And then even when they do read it, they don't often leave a review. I'll find out years later, someone will talk about having read my book and I didn't even know they did. But they don't think to mention it. They don't take time to put a review on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or something like that. But a lot of people have, and I enjoy seeing that. There's more certainly for Caretaker of a King because it's been out longer. But the nicest, beyond what my wife said, Caretaker of a King came out in 2015. My parents both passed in 16.
Oh,
And my dad had Parkinson's. His dementia didn't really allow him. I read some of it to him, but he couldn't appreciate it that much at that time. But after he passed, my mom lived another 9 months and she told me she read it twice. And I said, "Why'd you read it twice?" And she said, "Well, because I learned so much from it."
that's
And you have to understand that my mom and dad were two of the greatest people God put in my life and the greatest examples. So that coming from her meant a great deal to me.
Mm-hmm. I bet. So, what about other family members? What about your brother, friends, faith community? What has been their response from your book?
Been very good. It's kind of interesting, and I've been in church leadership before. It's difficult for churches to, if they promote one thing, they have to promote everything. So your
Yeah.
home church has to walk that line. It's a difficult one. But
Yeah.
I got a chance to, they asked me to write a study guide for Caretaker for King for a neighboring church, and a men's study group went through the book. And I sat in. I told them I'm not wanting to lead the study, but I'd be happy to sit in. And they asked me if I would. And that was really fun because none of them are people I knew before. To see that it touched them in some of the ways it did me was definitely affirming.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed what they were getting out of it. And like you said, it touches just like, well, certainly, I mean, the book has a lot of Bible references in it. And the Bible it touches us in different ways. We gain different understanding depending on the situation of life we're in. So
Mhm.
it's always new and fresh reading the Bible. And I think um, people got different things from the book as well because of their situation in life. And I just enjoyed hearing their perspective on it.
That's so special, yeah. You mentioned earlier some advice that you would have for anyone writing a book. Do you have any other advice you'd like to give a writer wanting to publish their book, whether that be a Christian novel or any other genre or subject?
I've thought about that. I wouldn't know for somebody that's writing a different type rather than a novel, like a reference book or something. I wouldn't have anything to offer really, but I do
Right.
think that writing about something that's meaningful to you is important because you know how Jesus told us to be witnesses, and I think um, the words that are most convincing are not people that are advocating or something or people that are adversaries to some point of view. It's people that are sharing some experience that they've had, witnesses.
Mhm.
And so I think when you are actually writing something that is important to you, that you're enjoying, that you're passionate about, that's our best chance to be effective in conveying that same feeling to someone else.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Do you have you are you writing right now? Are you working on anything right now? Or what kind of things are you working on this year, personally and book wise?
This, I'm not a self-promoter. I know that's not exactly the ideal fit for a publisher. Their objective is to sell books, and my goal is to share my experience. It's a little different. I hope that to share it with a lot of people, but it isn't primarily to, like I say, I don't care if my name's known, and I'm not trying to sell the maximum amount of books.
Mhm.
It's more important to me that it touches some lives.
Mhm.
But I am working on what I hope will be a children's book for my granddaughter.
Oh, that's exciting.
It's called The Littlest Lost Lamb, and we'll see. I'm maybe a third of the way into that. And right now, the publishing side of this, or the necessities of trying to share it with more people, is a challenge for me. So I'm dealing with that, but I'm looking forward to just being able to write and focus on that. And then another idea is I've always collected thoughts and ideas, some of which work their way into the book. But I've thought of putting all those together in a what would be called Proverbs of a Common Man, just things that I
Um,
think are true or
I like
mostly true, but just sharing some of those thoughts that occur in the daily life of, a regular person. So,
I like that. Those are
yeah.
both great projects. For the children's book, how long have you been working on that, and what has that been like?
Probably about half a year, but I haven't been able to be consistently on it.
Yeah.
So,
It's very
I
different.
that's it. That's a different venture for me. So, I love spending time. I don't get near enough time with my granddaughter, and she's so sweet. But I would like to be able to finish that and have that for her and for the newest member. I don't know the boy or girl, the one that's coming. It's uh, September is when the due date is. So, um, yeah, I'd like to get on that and focus on that for a while, but I haven't had much time for it yet.
Yeah. You'll get there, you'll get there. What I have one last question for you. What is the number one thing that you hope readers take away from your book?
I hope that it helps make it real for them, like it did for
Mhm.
me. You asked if I grew spiritually. Definitely. It helped me to, I guess it underscores how real those lives were and how Jesus
Mhm.
affected the lives of both Joseph in the first book, but Peter certainly, and all the disciples in the second, and so many people, that this really occurred. It isn't just some story, it's
Right.
actually an account. And we don't have all the touch points that we'd like. We have these little episodes, but they were all tied together and they were part of their lives. And those lives are real. I hope it
Mhm.
makes it real for people. And it certainly did for me as I was writing it. I mean, yeah, it happened 2000 years ago, but we're still talking about it. And
Right,
it's
absolutely.
still the most crucial thing in all of our eternities. So,
Mhm.
um, that's what and I hope that they, a reader gets the same sense of sometimes worship, sometimes awe, gratitude, the things I experienced as I was writing it.
That's great. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with us today, Norm, before we go?
I just appreciate you taking the time.
I
Um,
appreciate you. It's been great.
yeah, I hope, and that's what I hope, that people are. There's a passage I just read in where Jesus says to Simon the Pharisee, "I have something to tell you." And I always liked how he said that because he waited for Simon to respond and say, "What is it?" And
Mhm.
I'm not trying to convince somebody to read my book, but I've got something to tell too, and it's
Mhm.
about
Yep.
Jesus. And I hope if they're wanting to hear it, that they'll give it a chance and read it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we appreciate your time today, Norm, and your teachings, and we wish you the best of luck with your book. I'm sure it will touch and inspire a lot of people after this. If you are interested in reading Walking on Water and would like to purchase it, you can head to westbowpress.com through the online bookstore where you can find it and purchase it, and it is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Well, thank you so much, Norm, for taking the time, and thank you so much for publishing your book.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a blessed day. Bye.